Oh god. He's been severed.
Okay. Well, yes, it was I think my Audi was trying to control the stream there, my any or something, because God, my mic was not wanting to unmute. Anyways, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, welcome. We are finally doing this video. I know all y'all who subscribed to us probably like, hey, this video was up yesterday. What's it doing actually playing now? Well, we were dealing with some stuff, and I'm not going to get into it all right now, but we're finally here delivering on what we promised, which was a Severance season 2. Instead of an after show, like we didn't do it week by week, we're just going to do a whole kind of season retrospective review, and we're going to basically just discuss in non-spoiler detail what we thought of the season as a whole, what we thought of the finale, and how it compares to season 1 and the crazy season 1 finale. And then after that, we are going to have a spoilers section where we will talk about some key highlight moments that we want to discuss that happened in the season. And then we will segue on to how those key moments can tie into season 3 as we give our season 3 predictions and in the video there. So overall, I was very pleased with Severance season 2. It is my favorite show I've seen so far this year. I haven't seen it a lot, but right now it's my favorite show I've seen so far this year. And I just really thought the world building is just getting better. I think the characters were really fleshed out, and I think each one of them, Irving became my favorite. I think when I was like season 1, I was like Dylan's my favorite. But season 2, I think Irving kind of became my favorite just because it was like what he pulled off in episode 4. When we get to that was just exceptional. But all the acting, of course, across the board was excellent. I loved kind of seeing what they did with Mr. Milchick's character, what they did with Helly in this. All of them did a really good job, and this show does exactly what good sci-fi should do, which is raise more questions than answers. Don't answer every single thing. Give us just enough answers to be satisfied, which they did in the finale. I feel like they gave us just enough answers, but then make sure you leave a ton of questions open still, that you're just like, I am still so confused on this. And that way it can leave you pondering and thinking about it. That's what good sci-fi does. This is a thinking man sci-fi. I absolutely love it. It left my jaw on the severed floor by the end of this season for sure. What did you think of the season overall? And I guess for me, how I would compare this to, say, season 1. I think that this was a stronger season overall, I think, than season 1 was. Because season 1 had kind of a very slow start for me. I remember when I first watched it, I was like, I don't know about this show. Like, I watched the first 2 episodes, and I didn't know how to feel about it. And then once I continued on with it, I, of course, loved it. This one, I became hooked pretty instantly into the season, and this has some of the best episodes I've seen and am gonna see this entire year, which is episode 4, which one that is, episode 7, which is still my favorite episode, and then of course the finale. So it's like it had so many standout episodes in this season. And I think that when it comes to the finale, I think that the actual season finale of Severance season 1 obviously was more crazy. That was one of the greatest twist endings or cliffhanger endings ever on any medium, period. She's alive! And then it goes to black. That was like the most amazing ending. And then we had to wait 3 fucking years. Luckily, we don't have to do that this time around because they said that they've already been shooting it and that Severance season 3 will be coming out next year. So we don't have to wait a super long time this time. But I think that overall, that finale was more crazier, but I kind of felt the tension a bit more here. I guess because I've grown to love the characters even more, and my ass cheeks were seriously clenched. This whole finale, I was just on edge. But also, I think that from a filmmaking standpoint, this season has improved big time. Like there are some episodes, like episode 7 was entirely shot on film, and it's halfway shot on film, I should say, and it's glorious to look at. It is just, I couldn't believe my eyes watching it. And then same with the very last shot. I'm not going to say what happens in the very last shot yet until we get spoilers, but the very last scene is like shot on film as well, and it looks glorious. I just think that the production value has upped itself massively, and while season 1, it looked a little bit like still had a really high production value, but there was like a few like, oh, this is a TV show kind of thing. This one actually upped itself to feel a lot more cinematic this season. So I really like that. And yeah, I just was, pleasantly surprised. A really strong sophomore season for Severance season 2. What did you think of this season? How did it compare to season 1 for you? And how did the finale compare to the finale of season 1?
Yeah, I did really enjoy this season overall. It has some really high episodes for me. Those 2 standalone episodes. People are talking a lot about the Gemma episode, but for me, the Cobell episode did a lot of heavy lifting for me for a character that I did not connect to and thought was very unrelatable and almost took me out of the show. To me, that was a character I didn't like in season 1 that by the end of season 2, I loved, and I can't wait to see more of her character and how she relates to all these other characters as that storyline goes along. Yeah, so for me, this did a lot of good character lifting. It's not as good as season 1. Season 1 had that week-to-week tension where I could not wait for what was going to happen next. Every single episode ended where I was like, oh my God, I'd give away my savings to see the next episode right now. And they had that perfect pacing of episode tension and giving you just enough to keep you going mystery-wise. And I got to the end of season 1 and I felt like, wow, I've learned so much about this world and these characters and the sci-fi and the themes of this. And I got to the end of season 2 and I felt like I was kind of in the same place in a lot of regards for this show. I hadn't really learned a lot more plot-wise. We don't really know what Lumen's trying to do with Cold Harbor. We don't really know what, how is this person still alive? And, we haven't gotten a lot of answers, and that can be a little bit frustrating. But this is, the second season of the show that's going to have a lot of seasons. So for me, I don't really need to get all those answers right now. It was a fun ride, and I really enjoyed the highs of this season. But for me, when I look back at season 1, it has so many of the best moments of TV that year and stuff that I go back to all the time, like Dylan reaching out and barely getting those overtime switches right at the last second of that episode. And
so
those are just like all-timer moments. And this season did not have a lot of like all-timer moments. The finale is incredible, but I think along the ride, it had a lot of really good episodes, but nothing that was like, oh my God, I'm going to remember this thing for the rest of my life. But it was a good sophomore season, one where I hope they can improve from here. But yeah, this is an interesting kind of like palate cleanser and them showing us what they're interested in beyond just the Lumen mysteries. But I had a good time with this season overall, yeah, for sure. And I'm looking forward to what the next season has in store. We're going to talk about predictions, I think, at the end. But really, I'm not a big predictions guy. I'm just here for the ride. I'll predict kind of like week to week what's going to happen. But I enjoyed this season. It was not on the season 1 level for me. We're going to go into more of the details of spoilers as we go, like character by character, stuff that I liked and didn't like. But even though I'd say it's not as good as season 1, I'm not at all trying to downplay how good this thing actually is. Because especially leading up to that finale, once you hit the end of this season, like the ride is worth it. You know, it's like the destination makes that whole journey worth it. It's one of those things where you hit that last frame and you're like, okay, you know what? I'm glad that I spent the time doing this with these characters in these places. I would have liked to see more of like these characters together. We spent a lot of time with people separate and people in different journeys and people, you know, solo episodes here and there. I would have really liked to see this core cast together again, especially because you never know who's not going to come back next season, if there's even going to be, you know, a role for some of these characters next season. So we'll see how it goes next season. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one. I'm curious but nervous for what season 3 is going to give to us.
Yeah, thinking about it, I might be with you on that season 1, yeah, thinking back at that finale, just it definitely feels like an all-timer. Like when we talk about the greatest finales of all time, I think that the season 1 finale is going to be brought up more than the season 2 finale. It's one of those that just completely blew all of us away on the couch. But yeah, just because this season does have a few issues with it, and we'll get to them. Like I do think the first 2 episodes were really slow. That's why I didn't do week to week. So I was like, I don't know what to talk about. Like there's not much to talk about. Like I was just kind of like not much happened in the first 2 episodes. So so that's why I didn't do week to week. But once first 3 actually really not much happened, but once you got to like episode 4, which is that big episode, and then on, I felt like the whole season really found its footing and it was excellent. So it's by no means a sophomore slump, as they call it. This is still a excellent season of television, and it's very close to season 1 in terms of quality. It's not like,
yeah, for me season 1 is tighter. Like it has that really tight plot and revealing, episode by episode, giving you more information. But this is just a more ambitious season. It's a lot more interesting in that way. They were able to slow it down and say, we are going to have a whole episode with just this character or that character, or we're just going to be like, what would happen if an innie wakes up and they're just like standing in the middle of a frozen lake? And he's talked about in interviews, like the whole episode spawned from just that kind of one image of how would he have gotten there? What would the excuse be to have an innie wake up standing in the middle of a frozen lake saying, what the hell, how did I get here? And I feel like giving a season the time to not really care about the mystery, not really care about giving you information, just give you a cool episode with the premise. What would happen if an innie woke up on a frozen lake? What would happen if, this happened or that happened? What would it be like if an innie had 25 personalities and things like that? So I appreciate that this season, even though it's frustrating to not get the answers you want to get for the plot, when you look back at the season, I didn't really need those answers. Like they may come, they may not come, but this is the beginning of a long show, so I'm not pushing them for answers right now. I'm just happy that we got a lot of very cool standalone ideas with the premise here in this season. But I can totally understand if you're someone who's watching this for the plot, for the mystery, being like, what the hell? Nothing has been resolved. We know almost less than we knew a season ago in regards to some of these mysteries, but I enjoyed the journey for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to, like you said, not to answer all your questions this early on into a series, especially a sci-fi series. That's not something you want to do in that kind of genre. So I think it's that this is actually very much doing the right thing by leaving the audience confused, but also intrigued. It's not like okay, I just don't know what's going on, I'm going to give up. Like, this is stupid kind of deal. Mm-hmm. It's not like overdone, sort of like like not something where it's like this illogically doesn't make sense. Like I don't know how this could happen. This doesn't make any sense. I'm done with the show kind of deal.
What I like about the show is it pushes you like almost exactly to that line where you're like, what the hell is going on? And why is there a herd of sheep? Like, what am I looking at? And why is Irv in this giant frozen forest in the middle of nowhere? It's almost begging you to say like, this is too much. Like it's like seeing the shark and like narrowly avoiding jumping over it. It's like betting itself to jump over the shark and just not doing it. I really appreciate how this show took those ambitious swings to be like, we're gonna really push to what can we get away with in this show. Let's just not do another season of Mr. Milchek in the office doing crazy antics and having them try and solve mysteries behind all of that. There is that there, but I appreciated that they were like, let's just step away. Let's not feel pressured to do the same thing again. Let's just say, what can we do with this premise? What can we do with someone who's an innie and an outie? And I really enjoyed this season explores the conflict between the innie and the outie. Like last season, we didn't necessarily get a lot of the outie versions of these characters. We did for Mark, but all the other characters, really, the outies were very mysterious. We got like one scene with them essentially. So I really enjoyed that this season made the outies just as much of a character as the innies. So you do feel that conflict. Like if they're going to reintegrate, what does that mean? And you're finally actually getting to understand both of these conflicting personalities. It's not, the outies are not just kind of alluring whatever they could be figures. They're people of themselves. And it's really made that conflict so much more interesting. Like the core idea of an innie and an outie in the Severance procedure seemed so straightforward in the first season. And I think this season adds a lot of gray area to that and really makes it complicated of who is who and where is the line of, the person in the outie and the person in the innie. And if Mark reintegrates, who is there even a Mark left? Or is that like a third person reborn of the two people? Are both Marks dying to create a new Mark? I really enjoy that this season brings up all those questions, but also doesn't try and answer them. It allows you to come up to your own answers. So much of that last episode is told through silence, told through one character looking at another character and you having to project what could these characters be thinking or feeling. What is this love? Is this science? Is this nature versus nurture? Is this Greek mythology? I don't know, but I really enjoy that this season doesn't have the interest in giving you answers to stuff.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And speaking of not giving you answers, let's kind of give you our answers on what we thought of some of these stuff, but also not give you answers on other things by delving into our spoilers section.
Uh-oh.
So this is it, guys. If y'all have not seen Severance season 2, step away now, binge watch it. It's all on Apple TV Plus. Get yourself a trial. If you don't want to pay for it, binge the whole show, then come back here and watch the spoiler section, because this is one I definitely do not want to ruin for you guys. This is a show that's just, the less you know, the better. It's just don't read up on anything, don't watch anything, experience it for yourself. So with that said, what are some kind of key moments for you this season and key episodes and such for you this season?
For me, I really wanted to talk about what they do with Helly's character here. I think the last season introduces the idea that her outie is essentially the polar opposite of who she is, right? Like Helly on the inside is this rebel who wants to burn down the system just to do it and refuses to conform. And then on the outside, she seems to be the total company woman who is abiding by all the rules and totally cruel. And you get that very black and white line in the first season. And I think this season, even though we don't necessarily see a lot of Helena, we do see a lot of Helena because we were spending time with her without knowing it in those first couple of episodes. And I think this season really, even without showing us Helena, makes me empathize with Helena way more than I thought that I would. So like we see her inside pretending to be Helly throughout the first couple episodes here as a spy. You don't know that necessarily, but the show makes it like fairly obvious. I did not think it was surprising when they revealed it. eventually, but I guess some people thought it was surprising. There were people online who were Helly truthers saying, no, it's definitely still Helly. It's definitely still Helly. But I knew from like the first scene she was in, like when she walked out of the elevator, I was like, that ain't her. She's not walking like her, you know? And I think that's a testament to the performance that you can immediately be tagged that it looks like her, it walks like her and talks like her, but that's not Helly. And I think that is a testament to how good that acting is, that she can just sell that this is a different person without even having to say it or do it. But I really like the conflict of, you don't really know where her alliance is at this point. When she's pretending to be Helly and she's in love with Mark, you get the sense that she's starting to kind of like being the innie and like that life of being the little rebel and being the one who can say what she wants in class and get away with it. And you start to wonder if Helena doesn't want to go back to her outside life where she has to follow the rules and she has to be rigid and she has to go where the company tells her to go. Because once we see her on the outside, she's in a way just as stuck as Helly is on the inside. She can't really make a lot of her own decisions at her own company. She can't really do what she wants, even with her own body at her own company. And that's very frustrating, even for someone who's the villain of the show. So even between Helly and Cobell, I think this season did a great job of making the villains in season 1 who seem very black and white bad. Like, there was no part of me that walked out of season 1 saying, I can't wait to empathize with Helena. I walked out of season 1 saying, I hope Helly finds a way to like completely take over his body and kill this terrible person, because what the hell is this person like? But now I walk out of season 2 and I say, I don't really want that to happen. As bad as Helena is, like, I think she has a right to exist just as much as anybody else in this show does. And I really enjoy that this season made those lines very complicated. Like, sure, the innie and the outie are separate beings, but none of them are the real person or the good person or the bad person. Even Mark, by the end of the season, outie Mark is kind of an asshole, and you're like, what the hell? This guy doesn't seem like he cares about any Mark at all, and I don't even know if he cares about Gemma. He seems like he only wants Gemma back as like a, look what I'm back to my good life. Everything is fine now. Look, my wife is back. Is that going to fix all of these other problems in your life? Like, he might have Gemma back next season, but you're still going to be an alcoholic with a potentially no job if this Lumen thing goes badly. And is that you're gonna all of a sudden make all your problems go away overnight now that your wife is back? And I don't know if that's where they're going to go next season, but I think they did a great job of, even Mark, you're like, what the hell? I don't know if I like this outie Mark. So next season is going to be interesting, because I do think all of these indies and outies seem to have a lot of conflict within each other.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, I know we even have a friend who thought it was Helena or it was Helly instead of Helena at the beginning. But yeah, I knew it instantaneously. My mom knew it instantaneously. It's just was very obvious she was lying about what she said at the board meeting. Like, Helly would not do that. So I knew instantaneously that she was a spy. And then Irving caught on, and then that's when he was able to put a stop to her in episode 4. But we'll get to Irving because there's a lot of stuff to discuss with him. But yeah, Helly was great. While we're talking about Mark S, we can also talk about his whole storyline, Mark Scout and Mark S. I thought that, what they did with him, the reintegration, how he goes in and out of things is interesting. When he's like paralyzed from it, how it's like making him sick and everything. I thought that was really interesting. But you're seeing kind of this side to him. And we have a friend of ours, right, who says that the way Mark S acted in the finale when he's talking to his outie, that he's kind of an asshole. He doesn't care. But to be honest with you, looking at some previous episodes, the season or the one scene when Helly comes back and she's her normal Helly again, and she's trying to talk to Mark S, he is so dismissive of her. Like, he is just like, look, okay, can we just like not talk about it or whatever? And he's just like walking off, and she's like really upset, like, this is not you, Mark. What's going on? And he's just completely. Now I did hear some people say, "Oh no, that was his Audi version," but like that's not how reintegration works. He can't be his actually Audi, like, and like work and do all that stuff. So that was his any Mark, but he was just pissed off at what was happening with what just happened. Seeing who he thought was his friend turn out to be somebody else. And I agree. I felt sympathy for Helena. I think that it was interesting to see how she and Mark had chemistry here, because you see that both Helly and Mark obviously love each other. They've had that kind of romance blossoming since season 1. They kissed in season 1 and all that. But now in season 2, you not only have Heliar, but then you also have Helena, who is starting to get feelings for him, and she like confesses what she felt like in the tent, and that was really interesting and felt kind of real. And yeah, I think that's why Mark didn't just automatically assume she was somebody else, because it sounded like something Helly would say. And so yeah, I really loved what they did there, and then once Audi Mark finds out his wife is alive, the whole journey to try to get her back, and introducing oh my god, the one girl that helps him reintegrate. I'm blanking on her name right now. But yeah.
Yeah, the doctor that comes out from the defect from Lumen that helps him. I can't remember her name either, but yeah, she's kind of like a defect from Lumen that helps him towards the end of last season, and then comes back for this season for a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. And so yeah, that's her something Bagre, something, I forget what it is, but it's something like that. But yeah, she comes back, helps him to reintegrate, and then eventually his sister gets involved, and there's this whole mess there. So that was really interesting. And then I also loved seeing how like Lumen starts to have this profound respect for him, and they're trying to treat him like he's the best thing ever, because apparently he's the most important member in Lumen history, because if he fulfills Cold Harbor, then he has achieved Lumen's end goal that they have been looking to strive for. And
I'm still not sure what that is.
Yeah, I don't think we'll really ever know now, because it was completed, but it also kind of wasn't. So
yeah, it doesn't seem like it was completed. It seemed like Mark interrupted the process at seemingly the last second, and reached out to Gemma, and through Severance, despite the supposed severance of all her memories, she trusts Mark anyway. Mark, covered in blood, looking like a mad person, runs into the room, and she goes with him. Turns against the voice of God and goes with the crazy devil man that came into the room. Very interesting thing at the end there, because you never really know where that line is of Severance and love. It seems to be the thing that can break through Severance. There's no reason for her to trust Mark unless there's some level of
especially a Mark that has a blood all over his shirt too.
Absolutely, yep.
For killing the guy, it's like, oh my god. I wouldn't trust someone who has blood all over them. If they walked up to me and was like, "Hey, you need to come with me right now," it's like, no, you have blood all over you.
For me, the character I think had the best arc this season that totally blew me away is Milchick.
I do want to mention,
he was an incredible character.
Right before we moved to Milchick, I do want to mention on the Marquez thing. So this was one of the kind of flaws that I had with it, with the finale at least. And I want to get your opinion on this. So one of the issues that I had with the finale was obviously the part where Gemma's, screaming because she doesn't really understand the whole severance process. Even though she was severed, her Audi doesn't understand it. And so she sees Mark, who is her husband, turn back and go for Helly. He had that time in between. He kept on looking. He simply could have said, I know none of this makes sense right now, Gemma, but your husband, which is me, is going to explain it all. I promise you it'll make sense. You have to go now, or give her some reassurance there. Like, he didn't say anything. He just walks off. And I was like, that was fucking weird.
I
Like,
think it's a big assumption to say Gemma doesn't know how Severance works. I feel like she probably absolutely does. It seems like everybody in the world knows exactly how Severance works, right? No one is like, what the hell is Severance? Everybody knows what Severance is.
well,
and how
then
it
why
works.
then she should have then been the one to say, oh wait, that's probably my not even my husband. That's probably his innie.
Because she knows that
You
it's
know?
her husband. It's where the hell am I going to go? I don't know where I am. It's like Mark needs to come out and help me. She knows that's not her husband. She's not like, why isn't Mark coming back? She knows logically that that's not her husband, but she also has to, she doesn't know like that's his innie. Like she has to recognize, just like everybody else does, it's his body, but his brain is occupied by somebody else. And you get that conflict right at the end of like, does the love that Mark has for Gemma override the love that Mark has for Helly? You see almost like that internal conflict within Mark's head of the innie and the outie battling without even having to speak a word, which outie, which personality is going to win. And ultimately the innie maintains the control. And it's a weird parallel to Gemma, not where the outie seems to beat out the innie in the Gemma situation, right? Like the Gemma trusts Mark despite her innie's reason not to trust Mark. But then you almost get the opposite at the end where Mark, his innie, goes towards Helly despite, and seemingly at the beginning of the episode, the Gemma thing saying, oh, love will pull through Severance. Maybe it won't, because Mark's love for Gemma didn't pull through Severance, right? Mark's love for Helly did. So it's a really interesting final scene right there for sure.
I do want to correct Ari on here. So
yeah, go ahead.
So he does say, she literally says Mark S after he switches. Yes, but this is a very complicated episode. They say that once they're in the hallway, she is back to her Mrs. Fuck. What was her name in season 1?
Miss Casey.
Miss Casey. She's back to Miss Casey in that moment when she says,
it's a very funny moment. She wakes up and they're
Mark
kissing, and she's like, what's happening right now?
Yeah,
what is occurring?
That is the moment that you're referring to, and she's like, Mark S, and that's like, what is happening and all that stuff. That is then, and then once she's outside the doors of Lumen, that's when she's back to her normal outie Gemma, and that is her freaking out, saying, Mark, come with me. I don't know what I'm doing, Mark, and all that stuff. And so, just to let you know, it was kind of, even for me, like at times I had to realize, like, oh shit, okay, what's the innie, what's the outie? Because it kept on going back and forth over and over in the finale. It was seamless, but you got to really pay attention.
Yeah, and in that last moment, Mark S probably doesn't have a 30 seconds, 60 seconds to go tell Gemma what's going on. He's got to run right now if he's going to get anywhere, right? Yeah. These are his last seconds of life. Gemma can go figure it out. He doesn't really care about Gemma. In the end, who's Gemma to him? Gemma is just some other guy's wife that he got out. He did the hard part. He got her out. She can walk up the stairs. She's an adult. He
does know her, but as Miss Casey, he doesn't know her as Gemma, basically.
And he did the hard part. He got her out. Now he's got his girl to go back to. He doesn't care about some lady that he works with. He cares about his wife, his love.
Yeah, that's true. So it almost reminded me, I was so fascinated by like that idea of love in this season, because we also have Dylan and the contrast there between the innie and outie version of love, and how I guess this is a good segue to talk about Dylan real quick. We'll talk about Mr. Milchick in a second, but it's a good segue to talk about Dylan, because that is one thing I found fascinating, is how you get the story of him and his wife this season, but when he is his innie version of Dylan, that's the version that like his wife looked up to, that like maybe that he was that way when they first got married, basically. And then it's just over the time, he just became this, his outie version just became like this depressed kind of loner who isn't cool anymore. And she really liked the kind of caring, more thoughtful side to the any Dylan. And so when she kissed him, she feels that guilt. There's that whole kind of interesting contrast there.
Yeah, I
So
like that storyline because it could have gone so badly. And all season, I was waiting for it to go very badly, and all the way up to the point where he gets that letter from his Audi, and he opens it up, and it says "Dear Innie," and you're like, oh man, this guy is gonna like roast Dylan right now, and he's gonna feel terrible, and it's gonna be a really depressing ending. And it's in the end, he's very empathetic, and I think this is an example of like what these relationships could be in the most positive way possible. Like he says, "Look, man, you're an idealized version of myself. You're in a way who I wish I could be," and it's kind of empowering to know that in some form I'm capable of being that person. And at the end of the episode, we see Audi Dylan kind of engaging with his kids again. Like at the beginning of the season, he was just kind of sitting there, didn't really care about his family. At the end of the season, he's at least at the table talking to his kids. Seems like he cares a little bit more. And I think his connection with Innie Dylan and his conversations with his wife inspired that change in Audi Dylan. I think it's a very, very cool arc for the character. And like I said, an example of how these relationships could be positive and not so conflicting like Mark is with his Innie, where they cannot get on the same page of who is the real Audi and who is the real person in charge. Like no one is the real Dylan. They're both valid people, and I think that's what makes this relationship so interesting. Is both of those characters can recognize that the other person has things that they want within themselves. Innie Dylan says, "Oh, I wish I had that wife and kids." Audi Dylan says, "Oh, I wish I was that confident, cool know-it-all that can swear in my boss's face and be the guy that everybody loves." So I think it's a very cool concept that both of them can recognize things within the other person that they wish they were. It makes that relationship so much more interesting than just, "Oh, I'm the real Dylan. No, I'm the real Dylan. Oh, I want that wife. You want that wife." That could have gone to, a very conflicting place where they both want the same woman and they're almost like fighting with each other for the woman in a way. But they ended up on a very positive note. And I think that's a great way to end that relationship.
yeah, I think so as well too, and I think it's interesting too, just seeing not only that part of Dylan's story, but also him and like Irving and how that is, and how he basically kind of inspires Irving to snap out of his kind of depressive phase that he's in at the beginning of the season. And yeah, they did a really good job at developing Dylan as well when it comes to the hallway and what is behind the photo and all that stuff. And like they did a really good job there. But yeah, his main storyline was the scenes that he had with his wife, and that was, I thought, really, really fascinating.
Yeah, and I think Dylan is an inspiring character at the end of the season too, because he represents that coworker that they try and give the teachers pet stuff to. And if this is a show about like class unity in some way, Dylan's sort of the guy where it's like, oh, what if we treat this guy nicely and give him a couple extra rewards? Maybe, they won't work together. And by the end of the season, they do work together. And I really think Dylan's, charging Mr. Milchick and with that vending machine in the last episode is a great end to that character, because he was very conflicted throughout the season of where do my loyalties lie. I know emotionally and logically that like I should be with my Innie brethren, but also like I really like this seeing my wife. I really like getting these extra privileges, extra knowledge of my life. So you get that conflict, and then ultimately I really think it's a positive ending that Dylan joins, the quote unquote good guys and fights against the oppressors, because so easily you could see this season ending with all of these characters butting heads and no hope for the future. But that final moment with Dylan is like, hey, maybe we really can do this. Maybe we actually can get through to each other, and it's not just going to be another cold reset to there's no hope anymore. Actually, maybe we actually can do this.
Well, that's a really good segue. Talking about the oppressors, let's move on to who I think, other than maybe Irving, had the best development this season. and that was Mr. Milchick. I think
Absolutely.
he maybe might have even had the best arc this season, I thought, when it came to his character. Well, I really was fascinated by him because he still is a scumbag. Let's get that out of the way. Like, he's still not a good person, obviously. There's some practices he does when he is running the company where it's very questionable. But also, you really understand him this season. And you almost sympathize with him because he isn't respected by any of his peers. And that hurts, to not only be disrespected by all of your coworkers, but also to have all of corporate completely disrespect you and disregard you and say stuff like, I felt bad for him because I'm like, I love Mr. Milchick's big words, and they're criticizing him over using too many big words. And then he tells him devour fetulence, and that was really funny. But then there was that like really interesting moment that we had when he was talking to Audi Mark on the phone, and Audi Mark was like, "Well, isn't this work? We work on life, we work on ourselves, and all that stuff." And he was like talking about that, and you see Mr. Milchick, he is looking at that portrait that like calms him down, and he's just looking at it with this like face, just pondering. And then he's like, "Can I guarantee you can work tomorrow?" And he's like, "Yes." And he puts up the phone, and he's just like sitting there almost in a zoning state, like he's just contemplating everything he's done within his life.
Yeah, I think Mr. Milchick's interesting in that moment because I think he represents someone who's right on the edge of like caving, and recognizing that he's on the wrong side and he needs to, turn and fight for the innings. There's moments where he recognizes that he is not the good guy here. There's so many moments where he recognizes that he's being treated like an outsider. He's handed these, redesigned Kier paintings where all of a sudden Kier is now painted as a black person, and it's very off-putting to Milchick because it's like, oh, you didn't think I could relate to this person before now, but all of a sudden you make him a black guy, and now I can relate to him. It's a weird assumption from this corporation to make, and I think that's a very complex moment, especially because there's never a scene where Milchick sits down and says, "Here's how I feel about this." You have to read it only through the facial expressions and the very stilted words that you can exchange with characters like Natalie, where they can't talk about how they really feel. They have to talk in this very, very distant corporate lingo where they cannot, even through their eyes, give any little indication of how they actually feel. And that's just so dehumanizing. And I think, when they fight against Milchick at the end, it's a, here we go, this is awesome moment, but it's also depressing because, Milchick is like one day away from realizing that he should be on that other side of that door with Dylan in the band. I think he could have very easily been on that side, but in that moment when he's locked in that bathroom, he's saying, "You know what? Fuck these innies. I don't need them." And they essentially turned Milchick into the villain that he was trying so hard not to be. All season he was genuinely trying to make their lives better. He was trying to not be Cobell. He was that guy who sat there and said, "You know what? If I was in charge, I'd be the cool manager. I'd be the nice manager. I'd be the guy that lets them do whatever they want." And he tried that, and look, it didn't work. And it's not because Milchick is a bad manager. It's because the entire system is not built to function that way, And no matter what one manager does, you can't really change the entire system that's built to work the way it's working. And when you're sitting at work and you're saying, "You know what, I'm working too many hours, I'm not getting paid enough, this sucks," the manager probably agrees with you, and there's not really a lot that they can do. Sure, they can storm out and say, "I'm not doing this anymore," but then they're not going to have a job either. And Milchick, without having ever any moment where he sits down and says that, you can feel that within all of his scenes. You can feel that he's saying, why am I doing this? I'm trying to climb up this ladder of a corporation that does not respect me. For what reason? They're treating me exactly the same way that I'm treating the innies. And in the end, he is so close to joining those innies, but when they fight against him and lock him in that bathroom, he says, "You know what, I'm done." and
I
they ended up killing
honestly,
like an ally they could have had.
yeah, I feel like honestly, all they needed to do at that point was just kind of almost apologize to him and have a
Hmm.
heart to heart conversation with him. And I feel like the moment they have that heart to heart conversation, I feel like there could have been a scene of him breaking down crying, or at least being able to express his emotion towards them and say like, all right, I'm standing with you, I'm here with you. But because of what they did, it feels like he was betrayed
Hmm.
completely. And so yeah, you definitely can understand him. And I I think that's fascinating. Now we get like a full on, yeah, like he's gonna be probably like the villain now going forward because the big other corporate head is dead. So
Yeah, I
um
think he's a more interesting villain. Essentially the same role that Cobell had in season one, but I think a much more interesting version of that. Like
uh,
Cobell was almost a cartoon character in the way that she was so loyal to the beliefs of Lumen in that first season. I never once felt like she was an actual person that was in charge of people. And
sure.
I think Mr. Milchick genuinely feels like a guy that could go home and like have a life and sit with his wife and tell her about his day or
Although
something like that.
I think he lives at work. I don't think because we've never seen him. We've seen him leave, but only to like talk to the other workers in their Audi forms. We've never seen him in his own house. We don't know if he has kids. We don't know if he has a wife. Like we don't know anything about him in that on at that point.
Yeah, and he seems like somebody who's had to give up a lot of that stuff to be loyal to this company. And well, one day when I get to this level or that level, maybe I'll have my life. I think when you talk about that moment where Marquez says, "Oh, isn't that what Lumen is all about?" And he kind of looks off, and I think he thinks like, "Damn, it really is all about that." But I had nothing else. Like all I have is this job, and I have nothing else in my life but this. And I really hope next season we spend more time with Milchick. I would love to see what he does on his off hours. Does he really live at work? That would be interesting. Does he go home and sit in his off in like an apartment by himself or something like that and cry? Like what does Mr. Milchick's life look like? I could see him going home and putting on some like classical jazz, sitting there reading some old school literature or something like that in like a big library or something. I could see him living some kind of luxurious but lonely life that way. He's very well read, so I'd love to see what is he out there doing with his free time. Where is he getting all this vocabulary from?
As yeah, as long as we get more Mr. Milchick dancing, I will be happy. We've had
Yeah, there
him.
was a good amount of fan service in this last episode, and sometimes fan service can be a little too much. But you know what? I was happy for it this time. You're giving me Milkcheck. You're doubling up with him with that band going down the hallway. I don't know if I need that like again next season. You gave it to me this season again, and it was awesome. Maybe you hold me off for a season or something. Maybe make somebody else dance. But what a talented actor! I'd love to see him be in a musical or something like that.
I
Really
definitely think
showing off.
when we'll discuss because I'm trying to watch a lot of TV too, but this year, but we'll discuss Emmys and all that stuff on Award Roundtable this year. But I definitely do think that he has a very strong chance of getting an Emmy nomination for supporting actor this year,
He
which would
deserves it.
be
He was incredible, and
which would be
everybody else in the show is good, but he was great. He was amazing, and he's the lifeblood of this entire season. Even when the season starts to kind of like lose me, and I'm saying, okay, we're kind of resetting the palette here when we're going back to the beginning or whatever. But he'll come in, and all of a sudden everything is great again. He really revs up the engine of this show.
Speaking of, that's a good segue because he was taking up the mantle for Harmony Cobell, and she's also somebody who, at yeah, season one she was a cartoon character, but here in season two, she does get a chance to grow more because she has an entire episode dedicated to her, where you understand where she comes from, why she is the way she is, and you understand that Lumen basically has screwed her over by just stealing all of her ideas. And in a way, I don't think she's fully redeemed. That's going to go into kind of predictions for season 3 later. I think that she still is like wanting power. I think she wants to take down the Egans and then kind of take over Lumina. I don't think she's about actually helping Mark and all the and like his sister. And I don't think she actually genuinely cares about them. I think she's still selfish. But with all that said, it is interesting to sort of see a semi redemption arc here for her as she's trying to help them out. And you get that one girl who is helping him to reintegrate. She is like telling his sister, like, if you call, I'm done. Because she apparently there's some beef there that we still haven't even explored yet. Ringabi, that was her name. Ringabi. So Ringabi and Harmony Cobell, they have a history. We don't know what it is yet. That probably will be explored in season 3. But you could tell that Ringabi was not pleased with that, and she left. And then we got his sister Devin calling Miss Cobell and her helping out. But also there was some interesting stuff with her previously in the season where you could see that change in her of when Mark was there, like, it's like, do you know about Gemma? And the way she like looks at him before she screams and like rides off is really interesting. And there's a few other aspects to her that you can, like, when Helly basically is, or Helena is talking to her and she comes up there and she sees that guy standing there, she completely walks off terrified. Like, she's like, I'm like, who's this guy? Why the hell is she terrified? Is he like someone who hurt her or just what the hell? Why is this like all of a sudden? Has to be brought up at some point. So I found that pretty fascinating. Then there's a portion where they really just forget she exists in the season. She's just not in episodes for a good while, and then she reappears.
She had to go film with Robert Zemeckis. She's a little busy.
Oh yeah, that's true. But and then she appears in episode 8 again, and that was. I thought that episode. I know it's very much a kind of episode that is divisive, but personally, I liked the episode. I thought it was kind of interesting. I don't love it. It's not like gonna be one of the standout best episodes of the series. Oh my god! But I thought, it's a good episode. I didn't really see much wrong with it, but it is the lowest rated episode of the series so far.
I absolutely love the episode. I honestly think it is one of the better episodes of the season. It did a lot, like I said, to make a character that I thought was ridiculous and unrelatable, somebody that I actually cared about and rooted for and understood. But I also think it did a great job of exploring those themes of, what capitalism does to the world and does to people in it. And it's this gorgeous landscape that she's from, these really beautiful coastal towns that are destroyed by this disgusting factory that's just abandoned when it wasn't needed anymore. And I think it's a really a moving look at what these companies do. They take all these people up in this small town and say, oh, build our factory for us, work as our child laborers. Lumen says, oh, we'll just kind of drug you so you don't even know what you're doing all day. You'll be so high you don't know how hard you're working. And then you'll get to the end of the day and you will barely remember what you did all day, but you'll be like, oh, I guess I worked hard. And I almost wonder if that factory was a precursor to Severance. They kind of drug all of their employees so that they don't know what they're doing at work. And then they say, hey, what if we didn't have to drug them? What if we could just, figure out some way to do it scientifically to make them not know what they're doing at work? So I really appreciated what that episode explored in terms of Lumen's origins. And like I said, how capitalism just kind of abandons the people that built it up when they don't need them anymore. So I really enjoyed how she shows up in this town and everybody there is just kind of like these walking dead zombie characters that are like, all gray and dying and feel like they're just like on the verge of fading away. Every single person that she meets down there feels like they're just barely moving their bodies, just going through the motions every day. And I really loved how down that episode was. And in a show that can be so fun, and so up, crazy. And oh my God, Milchick is dancing. Look at all these lights, and it's so funny. Ben Stiller is doing a voice and stuff like that. And this episode, it didn't need to be funny. It was like, actually, this is terrible. Like this is a crazy sci-fi with all these kooky elements, but also we're trying to be about something that's actually happening in the real world and is actually affecting people in the real world. And it's a fun reminder of, this is not just a show about crazy stuff happening. It also is trying to be about something, and I feel like when you go on Twitter and sometimes people are like, oh, Severance is cool, Severance is crazy, isn't that awesome? And you don't always see discussions about what it's actually trying to say about, work and capitalism and how hard they try to separate us from the labor that we're doing and the results of our labor. So I really, really appreciated this episode being a cold reminder of what the show really is about beyond the science fiction of it all.
Oh yeah. No, I think I think it couldn't say.
And the interesting reveal as well that she created the thing. She is the origin of the severance procedure. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about her being the creator?
Yeah, I thought that it was very interesting that she was the creator of it, and that all of her ideas basically Lumen just stole from her. And that's why I think that, she couldn't just completely betray it, Lumen. I think that that's why there's going to be a part of her that still wants to take back that control, take back the, because she is in charge of it. She made it. It's her baby. So I think she's going to want to keep that. And so, yeah, I was really fascinated, and I think it made a lot of sense. I know that there's people who've been theorizing that maybe Miss Cobell herself was severed because of, how she would go back, because she seemed almost different in season 1 when she was her outie version, watching over Mark and all that stuff, compared to the any version, or that maybe she is also reintegrated. There's some people who theorizing that would be interesting, but
I do have a theory. I don't know if you want me to drop my Cobell severed theory now or save it for predictions for next year, but I definitely do think that Cobell is severed, and I think towards the end of this season we get this reveal that Jaime Egan has regularly been taking women to these birthing cabins to give birth to what seem to be like illegitimate children of Jaime Egan. And I predict that in her past, when she was that child laborer trying so much to impress her boss, if maybe she was also, a child bride that he took to bed as a kid and then took her off to the birthing cabin to quietly give birth. And I wonder if she was severed so that she wouldn't remember this kind of affair happening. But then I also predict that she is the one that believes heavily in reintegration being possible. She, from the beginning of the show, is saying, it is possible. I know it's possible. The board is saying it's not. She's saying, I know it is. You can tell me that it's not, but I know that it is. And I think she knows that it is because she's experienced it. I think at some point she reintegrated and remembered what happened between her and Jaime Egan. And that's kind of what has created this really kind of odd, cold, distant character that has all this affinity for the Egans and belief in the Egans, but yet a really, really dark hatred for like the actual company itself. And I could see that being part of her motivation, is that she trusted in Egan. She believed in Egan. She showed him her brilliant idea and said, look what I created, Jaime Egan. And he rewarded her by essentially, assaying her as a child. And maybe even having, people are also theorizing that she may have been the mother of Helly. So I could see that being a surprise reveal of Helly being the child of Miss Cobell after like a Jaime Egan child bride situation.
Why do you think that in that one episode she was scared to kind of go back with like the guy and everything?
I think she saw that guy and she said, if I go back, they're going to kill me. She saw that guy. She said, it's some big buff guy. He probably has a gun. If I walk in that car right now, they're going to kill me. They want me dead. I know too much. They're going to kill me. They're either going to kill me or they're going to like lock me away forever. So I'm not getting in that car. It's like when they say if some kidnapper puts a gun in you and says, get in my car and come with me, don't get in the car. Like I'd rather be shot than get in the car with you and go wherever you're going to take me. Don't get in the car. So I think she followed rule number 1 of armed kidnapping situation is don't listen to the armed kidnapper. Don't get in the car and go with the kidnapper. I'd rather just run. And she followed that rule. Just run.
Yeah. No, I think I agree completely. Let's move on to another character, one that we've not talked about, but a main character, and that is Irving. Let's do Irving and Bert together since they're so integral as the Irving and Bert kind of relationship. Let's do those two together. What did you think about both of their arcs this season?
This was probably my most conflicting part of this season, and I loved this relationship in the first season. I thought it was a really complex idea of these two innies falling in love and projecting onto that relationship. Who could these outies possibly be? You wonder, is this person married to somebody else? Maybe one of these people is going to be some like extreme homophobe or something like that. And you have all these ideas of who these people can be. And then I think the ultimate culmination of that relationship in this season was something that I'm not totally sure how I feel about. Like, I really, really liked the episode and that conversation I had at dinner with John Noble, who comes in to guest star as Walken's husband here. Great. 3 of like some of the best character actors, working today, sitting at a table having a great, really toasty sci-fi conversation about these really intellectual, mythological ideas. And I really I enjoyed that concept of like.
I especially loved. I hate to interrupt, but I also loved in the conversation, as someone who grew up in the church, thought this was really interesting discussion how they brought religion into it and talked about how they think that the any versions or whatever will go to like heaven, and that the outie versions are going to go to hell or something. And that's like I thought that was a really interesting way to explore that, even that everyone's bought in on this.
I really like
that even the church is bought in on this whole severance bullshit. So
yeah, I really like that too, because realistically, if something like this existed in the world, everyone would have to have some level of an opinion on it. It's not even about buying into the bullshit. It's about it exists. Like, you need to have an opinion on this, whether you like it or not. It's real, and you got to have a stance on this morally. It feels similarly to AI and the increasing the rise of AI. You can sit there and be like, oh, well, I don't really, what does it have to do with me? But like, you're going to have to take a stance eventually, like, because it's coming for your job. It's going to be your job eventually on the line with it. And it also reminded me of The Leftovers, because The Leftovers engages with this question of, what if like 2% of the population just kind of disappeared for no reason at all, and there was no explanation of why this happened or who was picked or anything like that. And I think what was interesting about that show is it explores how the larger world responds to something completely crazy happening. Like, how does the world religions respond to something like that happening? What is their answer to that? Because you're going to go to church the next day and be like, what the fuck just happened? Like, was that the rapture? Because I thought I was going to church every week and giving my donations, and now I'm still here, So what really happened? And I feel like similarly, this is an interesting look. Like, if Severance existed, every single like world religion would have to have a statement on, okay, if I go and get severed, like, am I going to go to hell? Am I creating life? Is that something I should be doing? Like, if you're firmly religious, you think God should be the one creating life. And if you're getting the severance procedure, in a way, you are creating another life. You're creating a person who sure has your body, but is an entirely new being. And like, at what point do you have some level of a moral responsibility over that person? And yeah, I really like that this explores like, hey, Bert has done some bad things in his past, so I wanted to sever myself so that some version of me could be a good person. And I really like that idea, I guess, because it's moving that somebody who has done so many terrible things could have that idea of like, you know what, maybe there's a version of myself that, you know, is worthy of love and is worthy of being a good person. And when you see Bert the innie, he is a genuine person. Everybody loves Bert the innie,
Oh,
and you know they all want to be with him and spend time with him and hang out with him. And Bert the outie, he seems like he's not a good guy, you know, and he seems like he's done a lot of bad stuff for Lumen. I wish we could have gotten more information about like what he was doing for Lumen, and a lot of I hope next season we get a better idea of like the larger scope of the world, you know, and how are how are people really reacting to the Severance thing? How is Lumen? What is their reach? Like, I want to get a better idea of the wider world. But I appreciated this thing with John Turturro's character, but for me, his ending in that field trip episode where he essentially like drowns Helena and says, "I'm gonna kill her unless you
yeah.
bring her back to the innie." Like that's such a heroic final moment for Irv, and I love that final shot of him walking off into the desert or into the woods and essentially getting shut off. And when they bring him back after that, it feels like this weird ellipsis to the character that I didn't really need. Like I could have just left Bert. I could have just left Bert to like maybe never come back or like come back next season if they can get walk in. But I didn't really need like that last coda of Irv, you know, back in his life and running into Bert and going to the train station. Like I don't think that really added much to his arc. I don't really care all that much about Audi Irv. Like he's not a character that I spent any time with compared to all of the other Audis. So I don't
Yeah.
really care that much about like what is he going to get on the train or anything like that. Like you could have saved all of that stuff, I think, for next season. But I also think maybe they were afraid that they wouldn't get to Turturro and walking back for next season or however many years. So they wanted to wrap that storyline up because it does give them a good moment where they're hugging and they're saying, "Come on, I'm ready. I am ready." And it's a nice callback to when he's saying, "I'm not." He's saying in the first season he wasn't ready for love, and now once he is ready for love, it's too late, and he's already gone too far down that line to go back, and it's very tragic. I don't know how much it adds to the actual arc of any Irv that we care about.
It makes me wonder if Irving was reintegrated because it almost feels like he remembers Bert, the way he puts his head on him and like the way he's like saying I'm ready for love. Like it almost seems like he remembers him in a way. So
yeah, I think we have to assume at this point that the Severance line is a little bit thinner than we thought that it was. Especially in terms of emotional connections, right? It seems like love is the one thing that can sort of reach through that Severance procedure. If maybe they're trying to say in some way that love is not like this brain-born thinking thing. It's sort of this emotional thing that you wonder if emotions can be the thing that kind of reach through Severance, not just love, but also you could see maybe anger or hatred or something like that being something that can reach through Severance, something that is beyond the logic of a person. So I really like that moment because I don't know if he's literally been reintegrated in terms of taking the surgery and all that stuff, but I think there is some bleed over, especially when you're in very intense emotional moments, because you can feel in that moment like any Irv is in that body somewhere, right? And you wonder if any Irv is like calling out saying, "Please God, don't let me leave Bert." And even though he's not in control of the body, in some way, like the soul of any Irv is like bleeding through at that moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. I will say I've gotten to the point. I do agree once he got onto the train and he kind of drove off that I don't think we would even really I don't think we need to see Irv anymore. Honestly. I think his story just kind of ended there. Like he's on the train, he's got the dog, he's gonna live a peaceful life now. I don't see a reason why he needs to come back. And
I'm not sure because like there is this whole he's been investigating Lumen. He has all these notes, all this research, and it's kind of strange to just kind of drop all of that. He has all of this information, all of his drive as a character to know more, and it's weird that he would just kind of walk off and not still want to know more. It's in a weird final moment for the character. I don't really know why Audi Irv would do that because he didn't seem like a character who would just walk away.
Yeah, because who do you think it was that he was talking to on the phone?
Yeah, that's going to be what I don't know because I was assuming it was Bert, but I don't. Now at the end of the season, it very much does not seem like it was Bert.
I'm thinking it was probably Rangabi, possibly that he was talking to, or or Harmony Cobell.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I think it's Cobell. I could see
Yeah.
Cobell, I think, trying to kind of work her way back in somehow or another. Whether it's through Mark, whether it's through Irv.
Yeah.
But it's odd they didn't reveal that. It's been a while since that scene, and I wonder if we're supposed to know who that is by now, and we just didn't. No one really picked it up, or if that was like a dangling thread they didn't really like come back around to, or if that's something they are going to come back around to, right? Like if Totoro is gone, is there any reason to ever reveal who that person was on the phone? Because I don't really think there is. Like if Totoro is gone, then who even cares who was on the phone?
True. So
is that ready to move on? Because I feel like I'm ready for some season 3 predictions. That's got me warmed up.
Yeah, I know, right?
For some season 3
this is
predictions.
definitely
I don't have a lot, but I have a little.
I did want to talk about lastly, we can just talk over her briefly. I feel like the only other character that was really important this season was Miss Wong. And I'm curious, like, what you thought about her, and also what do you think she's coming back or what? Like,
yeah, she was an interesting character. At first, I was wondering, like, is she severed? Is she was she killed or something? And she similar to Miss Cobell in some kind of in like a car accident or something like that, similar to Miss Casey. I mean, but it seems like no, she was just like a kid that got some kind of like child internship thing at Lumen, and I think it's interesting. I think part of the reason they may have put her in charge is that the Indies are less likely to rebel against a kid. Like they may just be nicer to a child than they would be to somebody like Milchick or Cobell. So they're less likely to kind of like push back and get violent with an actual child than they would be with like an adult. I also wonder if like she was just there to further add to the reminder that Lumen is a horrific corporate evil organization that will just hire children and put children in really terrible compromising positions and put children through these really emotionally scarring like training situations where they end up leaving as like much worse people than they came in with. It's a very interesting look at a kid who kind of like ends up becoming brainwashed into believing in Lumen just like Cobell does, right? Because Cobell also was in this youth program thing for Lumen the same way that she was. So I think even before you see Cobell, you're getting this look at what Cobell probably went through as a kid, who had to go through the same exact procedure of coming in as a person who believed in his company, but just kind of wanted to get a summer job and see what it was like, and then leaves as this kind of hardened, cold soul. And you wonder if Cobell had a similar arc in her youth, and that's what brought her together. And there's also a cool moment too, where when Dylan quits, for one little moment, you get an actual emotional reaction from the young girl who says, "Oh, I feel bad that you're quitting, Dylan." And it seems like for a second in her eyes, like she actually does break through. But at the same time, you question if she actually does, because there's that whole bit in the first season of Milchick telling Mark to give caring eyes, and he's like, what is caring eyes?
Well, I think in this case too, it's the fact that she's basically being let go earlier than expected.
Mm-hmm.
And she had to break her toy. She had to do all that she played with the whole time. It's just like a lot of stuff like that, I think, came to fruition to her in the very last moments of the episode. I
am curious if we see her again, because she gets on that bus and goes off to like Alaska or some kind of
I've heard this
North Pole place.
I heard this dumb theory. All right, I read Reddit too much, and there was a theory. One doesn't make any sense. The other two are like, they would make sense, but they're also like, no, we don't have to do that. Which is, maybe Dylan isn't aware that he has another daughter or something like that. I've heard people say that, where it's like, maybe that is like Dylan's kid that he's not really aware of or something. And then I've heard some people say, what if it's Jimma's kid? Some people talked about how like that one to me makes no sense. I don't think
the ages do not line up there.
There's like, there's not actually enough line up there, but maybe. But then I've heard people say maybe she could be like Irving's child or one of these people's childs that got kind of brainwashed and tested on almost like a Gemma, almost like a Gemma herself, who was tested on and all that. So
yeah, I don't know about any of that. I
saying,
just think, they brought her in because it would be kind of absurd to put a kid in this situation. And it also brings out the fact that these innies are essentially kids themselves,
Yeah, I agree. And also just I think it was supposed to be a commentary on child labor. And
Oh yeah, there's child labor commentary throughout this season, and yeah, it like I said, absolutely gives you some information on what Cobell probably experienced however many years ago when she had to go through the same thing.
So yeah, with that said, we can kind of move on to some theories for season 3. Very first bit of theories I want to talk about is something we still have absolutely zero clue what this means. And I'm curious on if we'll actually learn in season 3 the goats. This to me is still a wild, weird aspect to Severance, where there are these goats that are on a separate part of the entire floor that are being like raised, and then we find out they're being like having blood sacrifices because she brings a goat over there to him and says, "How many more do I have to bring in?" And he's like, "However more until he is satisfied." And it's just like, what the hell? What's that supposed to mean? And I don't know of any of this that's going on. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on the goats and like what you think they represent. I know biblically they definitely are representing, I think, maybe devil or something like that, because in the Bible, a goat symbol represents the devil, basically. So I think there is something there. Maybe
I think there's absolutely some biblical commentary going on. I think when you look at the separation of the goats and the sheep, the believers and the non-believers, I think you can see that as a Severance commentary. The innie and the outie also being like the goat and the sheep. I also think, though, that they give you a pretty direct answer in this season finale of what the goats are for. I think the goat problem has been solved. I think the goat hole has been filled, because to me, the goats are created as essentially scapegoats. There's this idea of a scapegoat where the whole town would place all of their sins onto one goat, and the goat gets sacrificed, and all their sins for the year or whatever are forgiven. And I think they're going for a similar thing here, where they mention that the goats are essentially like the guides to the underworld from these innies after their sacrifice. Like they're right about to put down Gemma, and they're readying this scapegoat to sort of take all of Gemma's sins of all of her various innie personalities and place them onto this goat that will then go with her into whatever the Kier version of the afterlife is. And I don't know if that's a real thing, but I think Kier believes it's a real thing, so that's why they do it. And I think, they gave me, to me, I've been solved. The goat problem has been solved to me in this finale. They're just scapegoats. They were created and they're sacrificed because that's what Kier believes happens. And I wonder if there's gonna be another layer to it. Like maybe they are also doing something else with the goats in season 3 or something like that. But to me, if this was the last season or something like that, I would be like, you know what, they answered the goat question. They may do something with the goats more, but like to me, they gave me an answer for what the goats are for.
Yeah, I can understand that, but that I mean, I think like you said, it's all biblical, and you have to know
there's a lot of like some mythology in this season. Even in that last shot with Mark and Gemma and Helly in that hallway, and the very obvious kind of like Eurydice Orpheus reference, where like Eurydice descends into the underworld, and Orpheus kind of goes into the underworld to get his wife, and the Hades says, sure, you can take your wife back up to the top with you, but the one condition is you got to all exit the stairs up out of the underworld, and you can't turn around and look back at her. If you turn back and you look at her, she's stuck down here forever. And then in that, they've been referencing this quite a lot throughout the Severance, and they do such an on the nose, but like reversal of that in this last shot where like Mark turns around and you say, oh my God, I can't believe they just did that. Like she's going to be stuck in the underworld forever now, Mark. Why did you turn around? And then you essentially get Orpheus saying, you know what? No, I'm staying in the underworld. You know, I'm going to stay with my Eurydice. And Mark kind of turns around and says, I'm staying down in the underworld. So I love that this show is able to reference all kinds of mythology, not just the Bible, but it can reach into Greek mythology. It can reach all kinds of, 70s crime thrillers meets like, Orpheus. Who would have thought that would come together? But it did.
Exactly. Oh, man. Oh, speaking of him trying to pick between the two, I want to talk about that because clearly season 3 is going to have some Gemma and Mark drama. It looks like there's going to be something there, I think, where she's going to go home and be like, hey, what gives, husband? You left me. And he's going to be like, what are you talking about? And she's like, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And there's like, that whole kind of deal there. I know there's some people who are predicting that was actually Helena at the very end running with Mark.
Who was predicting that?
And I will say, if it was Helena, at least that would make some drama for season 3, because then it would be one of those things of she would pop in and say, hey, Mark, I just wanted to, say blah, 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 and whatever conversation happens. And then it's like almost, I mean, I know a love triangle would be very on the nose, but it would almost feel like a love triangle situation going on there in the real
I
world.
wonder if they're going to end up making us pick like one true love for Mark or something like that, or if they're going to figure out a way to have like both Marks get their love. And it ends up being a question of like, what is Severance going to ultimately be playing at? Is it going to be a happy ending or is it going to be a cynical ending? And we have a while until we find out. Like there's like 6 seasons or something like that he said he's planning for, so we're going to be here for a few years. But yeah, next season I am very curious to see how the Gemma and Mark drama plays out. But like Gemma knows she's not going to go home and be like, oh, why'd you leave me? She's going to go home and be like, your innie left me, asshole. Like she knows it's his innie. She understands how Severance works. She lives in the world. Like she's going to know what happened. My biggest question is like, if you're outie Mark, why would you ever go back to Lumen after that? Like you have your wife, and don't even go back to work.
Yeah.
Like, there's absolutely no motivation to me for Mark to go back unless this Gemma escape doesn't happen. Like, is she going to be able to get out? Is she going to know where to go? Is she going to be able to go down the stairs?
Well, and that's the
find
thing.
The escape car. Like she may just end up right back where she started. That would be very depressing. But like that, we don't know that she's going to go out and escape. They purposefully did not show like. The actress who plays Mark's sister said that within the original draft, there was a scene of her and Cobell like sitting outside in the car saying, what are we going to do? When they decided not to film and include that scene. And I'm glad they didn't include that because now there's a lot of ambiguity about like what the hell happens next with Gemma. Is she even going to like, is that conversation ever going to happen? Are Mark and Gemma even going to ever see each other again in the show? Like that could be the tragic turn to like, sure, your wife got out and is escaping and living her own life, but you're never going to see her again.
Yeah.
And I really got to find out, like, why would any Mark ever go back to work? Why would Hallie ever go back to work? Like, why would Lumen not just immediately fire these people? They don't need them anymore. And, like, if Gemma's really gone, Cold Harbor is gone. So they don't need Mark anymore. Unless Cold Harbor is so important that they keep Mark in order to get Gemma back. Like, is Mark going to now be, like, held hostage or something like that in order for Gemma to come back to Lumen? It could be a reversal of like, oh, we got to get Mark back. Now it's going to be like, oh, we got to get Gemma back. How do we get Gemma back? Because I don't think Cold Harbor has been completed. I think Mark interrupted Cold Harbor on its precipice, and Cold Harbor is now essentially either kaput or sitting at 99% or whatever.
Yeah, like it seemed like it was completed because it reached 100%, but then I think she had to set up that crib or whatever before everything could be going intact. She wasn't able to complete that. So I think, that could easily be a situation, or as much as I hate it, I mean, I already was worried that Gemma was going to get like shot or something on the way. I was like, oh my God, this is something going to happen. She's going to get, because I knew, so I was a little late to the episode, and I saw a thumbnail that had, Mark covered in blood. And I was like, oh shit, is that Gemma? And then we found out the blood was clearly Mr. Drebin. But
great fight right there too, by the way.
Oh yeah, excellent fight. That was really cool. But I think, because that's the thing, because they left it so ambiguous. What if she just kind of stands there? I was thinking that very same thing, is that one doctor who's like, you're gonna kill them all or whatever. Like, what if he finds her? Like, he's still there. Like, what if he runs?
Yeah, because they were the alarms are going off, the guards are running in. She has like seconds to get out of this building, and she has no idea where to go. She could walk back in the door, and all of a sudden she's severed again, and she doesn't know who she is.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that as much as it would suck, I think that could be either his motivation to come back, like that either she is stuck there again, or there could be something to where they just outright kill her. And then that could be his motivation for, I'm coming back to work, but not to work, to fuck over Lumen kind of deal.
Yeah, similar to like Squid Games too, where he comes back saying like, oh, I'm going to come back to take down the Squid Games. Like maybe he comes back because he's saying, you know what, I'm taking down this company.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there could be something like that. And it could cause some interesting drama to happen, because if Gemma was to die in that situation, right, then it would be a real battle between Any Mark and Outie Mark. I feel like there would be that conflict of he would never want to be Any Mark again, because Any Mark just basically let his wife die. And even though he almost had his wife in his grasp again. So it'll be really interesting to see how that all plays out.
I'm curious what Cold Harbor was, and if that's something we continue to explore in season 3, or if they've essentially wrapped it up. Because to me, Cold Harbor was, we're going to see if Gemma, while severed, can disassemble the crib of her own unborn child while wearing the clothes that she died in, while listening to the song that was on the radio while she died. If all of these stimuli from her past are all going off at the same time, is she still going to be completely severed and separate from herself? Like they are recreating as much as they possibly can her previous life, and the most emotionally taxing parts of her previous life, dying and losing a child. So I think Cold Harbor is just that final level of severance. Like, we've chopped his brain up 25 times. Is there anything left of that core being when she's severed? And I don't know if this season gave us a whole answer to that. Like, Mark interrupts right at the last second, so we don't really know how this thing goes. And she clearly remembers Mark. But yeah, I wonder if, like, is Cold Harbor resolved to you? Because I don't necessarily know exactly what Cold Harbor was doing, or like the thing about them saying, oh, it's the most important thing that's ever happened in the history of the world. I kind of wonder if, like, they say that to all the girls, like they call every department and say, you're doing the most important thing that's ever happened in the entire world. You got to make sure you do it perfectly. And that seems like a very corporate brain thing to do. Like, you go to all of your stores and say, oh, you are such an important store and we love you guys so much, or whatever. And it's similar to that. Like, you go to every single department and say, look, cheese cracker, that's the most important project we got going at Lumen. You guys got to master cheese cracker by midnight, or this whole company is collapsing, and I wonder if there's gonna be some kind of reveal of that. But yeah, I just don't know. I am frustrated that we had an entire season of them name dropping Cold Harbor, and we got to the end and we still don't 100% know what Cold Harbor is. Like, I feel like we should have, by the end of the season, knowing what Cold Harbor is. Like, I don't need answers for everything, but I feel like when you introduce something in episode 1 and you're teasing it beat by beat every episode, like, I want to get to the end and you give me like a resolution to that specific question, even if that question leads to more answers. That's stuff like Lost. You say, oh, what the hell is this latch? Where does this latch go? And then you get an answer that is more of a question. There's a person behind this latch or something like that.
They tell us what the numbers represent for Cold Harbor and everything. So that it's all like pretty much a window into Gemma's mind, which is interesting. But part of me thinks that we're done with Cold Harbor because I feel like, okay, this has gone on for so long, 2 seasons worth of this. We don't need to spend a whole other season on Cold Harbor. There's other stuff to explore that is in there. But I also don't think that we're fully done. I think that they're going to still talk about it but I think they're going to end it like maybe halfway through the season. Like they're just going to stop talking about it later because I think that it'll be revealed what it was, and then it's going to be like we didn't go through with it, and then they're going to resolve like other kind of issues, and I don't think they're going to talk about it after that. So
I'm really curious for next season where Harmony Cobell's alliances end up lying, because I'm sure she's going to have an ultimatum moment where, you know, she's given the offer of a lifetime from Lumen or something like that, and she has to decide, you know, am I going to stick with my rebellious guns or am I going to go back? And it's going to be very interesting to see what she ends up doing, because I could very much see her being someone that's like, sure, I'll help Mark and the Innies right now while it benefits my goals, but you know, eventually it's not going to, right? And when you also go back to this show as a class commentary thing, it's going to be a commentary there of like, sure, maybe we all dislike this one specific thing about the system or whatever, but we all have different opinions on what should be done. There's no one's going to agree on every single way everything should be done all the time, you know. And at some point, Cobell and Mark and Gemma and Irv and are all going to want different things, you know. Like what each of the Innies really wants is honestly different right now. Like Mark S doesn't really want to reintegrate, but yet Zach Cherry's character Dylan, he does want to reintegrate. I'm sure he'd love to reintegrate, and I think it's going to be interesting when these Innies goals start becoming different from each other, and we start seeing like, okay, we've had a lot of victories, but now it's like, what are we ultimately trying to do now that we have this power, you know? And that's going to be where I think the show becomes really interesting. Is we've seen these seasons of Innies pushing and pushing and pushing to get some autonomy. I want to see like what does it look like now? Like what does the fight look like when we try and like go to court and battle for like the legal rights of an Innie or something like that? You know, I really want to see this world start to expand next year in terms of the larger implications of this sci-fi stuff, because I like, oh, what's Cold Harbor, oh, what's Lumen up to, but to me, I watch this show because the idea of Severance itself is so fascinating, and it implies so many great philosophical questions, so many great science fiction questions, and I want to see the idea of Innie versus Outie, the idea of what Severance can be used for, like military. Is a military use Severance to go send in SEAL Team 6 to go murder a bunch of children or something, and then they come back and they don't remember what they even did? That, you know, you can't go on trial for war crimes, you don't even remember the war crime you did. There's so many interesting implications in terms of the large scale world of what Severance can be used for, and I want to see them get beyond the office setting and the kind of samey stuff that season 2 ended up coming down to in a lot of the episodes. I want to see more of like Harmony Cobell going off to the islands and discovering the old factories. I want to see something more like that, and I guess that's my biggest fear, is those episodes were the ones that people didn't like that much, right? And I wonder if they may end up doubling down on that and saying, you know what, we like those episodes, so we're just going to do them anyway. Or if they're going to go be like, oh, let's listen to the fans and give them stuff more like Defiant Jazz again, you know? And I don't want to see them try and repeat the past. I want to see them expand this idea of Severance to all of its crazy conclusions that it can possibly be expanded to, even if that means letting the Lumen mysteries be left behind, because I don't honestly care all that much about what Lumen is actually after, what Lumen is actually going for, because in the end, the motivation is greed, right? The motivation is human greed and, you know, corporate negligence. There's not going to be much more depth than that. It's going to be greed, and I think that's what it should be. You know, that's what the show's about. So I want to see them get beyond, what's behind this door, and actually kind of explore the themes in more complicated ways than that.
Agreed. Complete 100%. And so, yeah, do you have any extra kind of theories? I think those are the main ones I want to talk about, but I know there's also Irving. I do think that he's going to come back and kind of we're going to find out who he was talking to on the phone. I think that's going to be another big thing, like who he's been, what he's been documenting, all that. I think that's definitely going to be interesting. I think clearly Milchick is going to be pissed off and he's going to do something. I don't know what yet, but he's not going to just let Dylan and Helly and Mark slide. So
yeah, if Mr. Milchick was playing nice guy this season and saying, "What if I, played the kind card and did all of the nicety stuff of being good to the innies," I think next season is going to be him, whipping the lash or whatever, and lashing the whip and keeping them locked in the darkness and back to the break room for you guys. And I think they're going to go back to like the Living Hell style of Lumen more than like this loosey goosey kind of thing. I think that's more interesting anyway. I think that's a more compelling environment for them to have to solve mysteries in. Essentially, like, it wasn't that fun to see them wander the halls with nobody checking them, because like, where's the tension? They can just do whatever they want this season. I thought it was more fun to see them figure out ways to do that under the watchful nose of Cobell. And I hope next season we get like the fascist reign of Milchick. I want to see 1984 Milchick, big posters of Milchick's face saying Milchick is watching you. Give me that for next season. I want to see that. That'd be very fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you have any other theories?
No, I'm really, really excited. I would love to theorize more, but I think back to last season and I was like, how the hell are they possibly going to get Mark back to the floor? There's no way they're going to get that team back together. It would make no sense. And they figured out a way to do it. Like, if I sat here last season and tried to make predictions, there's no way I would have predicted like maybe anything that happened this season. So as much as I love making predictions, I just kind of want to see what happens, and I can't wait to start seeing the trailers. And it's going to be a long time. I'm imagining at least a year, if not 2 years, we'll be seeing Severance season 3. But I can't wait to see where they do it. And this was a really cool swing of a season. Next season, I think, is going to be very important for the show in terms of what does the show actually look like, and what do people want from the show. If season 3 is a ginormous, huge hit, like, this is going to be one of the shows of the century. But I could also see season 3 and sort of like teetering off. People were like, oh, season 2, there were those weird Cobell episodes. I didn't really, go for those weird episodes. I don't know. I really hope season 3 does well, though, because all is well that ends well. And I think this finale was adored by most of the fan base. So I think people in the end will look back on season 2 well and go into season 3 very optimistic. But who even knows where the show is going to go, man? I could have never guessed we'd be here after season 1, but we're here, and I really hope they go somewhere crazy with it. I want to see something as more ambitious and more crazy than this season was, even though this was also already a pretty ambitious season.
True. Yeah. No, it is really been ambitious, really crazy, really what the fuck kind of season. And I'm hoping we get more of that. And I hope we do get a lot more of those like standalone episodes like you talked about, because those were the highlights for me this season, was those standalone episodes, episode 7, 4, 8, stuff like that. So I really love those.
It's going to be a painful wait, man. I cannot believe it.
It is, but it's not going to be a 3-year wait. He did promise us that.
I hope so.
Let's hope another wire strike does happen. Anyways, that'll basically do it, guys, for our Severance season 2 review, predictions, all that. So let us know down in the comments below. Have you guys seen Severance? I hope y'all did, because we went into spoilers here.
Yeah, now you've seen it.
But also, yeah, now you've definitely seen it if you haven't. But what did y'all think of Severance season 2? Let us know down in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What are some of your theories, predictions that could happen for season 3? And let us know if next year or in 2 years, whenever it premieres, if you would like us to do it week by week, because we would be definitely interested in doing that. Just let us know if that's something you guys would like to see. But thank you all for tuning in. We will see you all very soon, actually tomorrow, because Final Destination 6 is releasing its trailer, so we will be doing a trailer reaction for you guys. Don't know when it's uploading, but we'll definitely be doing that for you guys. So stay tuned for that. As well as another trailer reaction for the One Battle After Another from Paul Thomas Anderson. Super excited about that. And much, much more, guys. We will see you soon. Until next time, stay classy, my friends, and do not get severed.
No.